Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the isolated small towns of Alberta, where frozen hearts and forgotten corners hide chilling secrets, and where help does not reach for miles. Across 7 disturbing accounts, we will uncover horrors so terrifying that those who experience them are forever haunted. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Alberta, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Miller, and this happened when I was driving home late one frigid December night. I had just finished a long shift at the mill in a small Alberta town and was taking Clearwater Road, a lonely stretch I'd driven countless times. The snow crunched beneath my tires, and the wind howled like it had a voice of its own. Streetlights were sparse, and the darkness seemed to stretch forever, swallowing everything beyond the edges of my headlights. About 10 miles in, I saw something, or someone, standing on the roadside. At first, I thought it was a stranded driver, but as I got closer, the figure didn't move to wave me down. Its shape was unnervingly human, yet the posture was off, almost twisted. My gut screamed to keep driving, but curiosity and perhaps foolishness made me slow down. As I approached, the figure vanished into the night without a sound, leaving behind only a faint echo of breath on the freezing wind. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. But a sense of dread settled into my chest, the kind that makes every small noise seem amplified. About a mile later, my headlights caught movement again, another figure, this one closer to the tree line. I slammed on the brakes, but the car skidded slightly on the icy road. The figure didn't step forward, it just watched me, and somehow I felt it watching through my very bones. Panic surged, and I tried to reverse, but the car groaned against the ice. In that instant, the figure lurched forward in a way no human should move. Jerky, unnatural, and then it was gone. The wind carried a whisper I couldn't place, almost like a voice muttering my name. My hands shook as I floored the accelerator, my mind racing with questions. What was out here? Was it human or something else? And why did it feel like it was following me, even though nothing was in sight? By the time I reached the turnoff to my neighborhood, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. Every shadow along the roadside seemed to twist and shift when I glanced at it. I kept thinking I saw shapes between the trees, fleeting glimpses of movement that vanished when I blinked. My mind raced with rational explanations, maybe a deer, a snowdrift that looked like a person. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Something was out there, waiting, and it knew I was alone. I pulled into my driveway, slammed the car door, and tried to convince myself it was over. But the unease didn't leave. I caught myself staring into the dark yard, where the streetlight barely reached, expecting to see that figure emerge from the shadows. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I checked it, there was a single text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have slowed down." I froze, staring at the screen. My heart was hammering so loudly, I thought it might give me away. I dialed my best friend, my voice shaking as I tried to sound calm, explaining I might have been followed. He laughed nervously, telling me it was probably just a prank. But the moment I hung up, I noticed footprints in the fresh snow leading from the street to my front door. They were too large to be mine, and the spacing was wrong, uneven, almost as if the person, or thing, didn't walk like a human should. I grabbed the baseball bat from the closet and approached the door, trying to steady my breathing. The footprint stopped abruptly a few feet from my porch, and then silence returned. But I knew better than to let my guard down. Something had crossed the line from the road into my life, and I had no idea if it had left. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, bat in hand, staring at the dark, silent street. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the siding made my nerves tighten like a coiled spring. Around 2 a.m., I saw it again. A shadow at the edge of the driveway, just beyond the weak glow of the streetlight. It didn't move like a normal person, more like it was gliding over the snow, and yet I could see the outline of long, crooked limbs. My breath caught, and I tried to blink it away, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But when I opened my eyes again, it was closer, almost within reach. I wanted to scream, but the cold fear held my voice hostage. It raised something. No, it didn't raise. It extended its arm unnaturally toward the house. My phone was dead. The battery had inexplicably drained, leaving me completely cut off. The reality of being utterly alone with this thing hit me like a physical blow. I forced myself to stay put, frozen behind the window, heart hammering in my chest. Suddenly, the porch light flickered violently, then went out. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft at first, growing louder like 100 voices murmuring all at once, echoing my name. Ethan. Ethan. The sound seemed to come from every direction, wrapping around me like a freezing hand. I felt the floorboards beneath me tremble, and the shadows in the yard twisted impossibly, stretching and bending as if alive. I wanted to run, to hide, but I couldn't move. The figure stopped just outside the yard, motionless, staring up at me through the dark, faceless void where its eyes should have been. I realized then that it didn't need to come closer to terrify me. It already had. Its presence was suffocating, a force that reached inside my mind and made me question reality itself. I don't know how long I stayed frozen behind that window, but eventually, desperation won over fear. I grabbed the bat and threw open the front door, yelling, demanding it leave. The wind cut through me like knives, and my voice barely carried through the freezing air. The figure didn't move. Instead, it tilted its head, as though studying me. And then, impossibly, it split into 2 shadows, then 3. They circled the yard silently, their forms bending and twisting unnaturally, yet moving in perfect unison. I realized I was surrounded, and no matter which way I turned, the shadows mirrored my every movement, closing in like a living nightmare. Panic surged, and I stumbled backward, slipping on the ice. My heart felt like it would burst through my chest. I screamed, raising the bat to strike, but before I could make contact, a cold, invisible force slammed into me, throwing me into the snow. The world tilted, and for a moment, I felt as if I were falling into darkness itself. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air, adrenaline flooding every nerve. The shadows began to converge, forming one towering figure, its shape impossibly tall, limbs crooked and stretching beyond human limits. Its faceless head tilted toward me, and a silent scream filled the void around my mind. Every instinct screamed to run, but the icy driveway made escape nearly impossible. I stumbled toward the car, praying it would start. My keys had fallen in the snow, and I fumbled, trembling violently as the figure advanced. Finally, I managed to unlock the door and slam it shut. The engine roared to life, but the shadows weren't gone. They pressed against the windows, bending reality, their whispers clawing at my mind. I floored the accelerator, tires spinning on ice, the shadows dissipating only when I reached the main road. Even now, I swear I can feel them watching, waiting for the next time I slow down on Clearwater Road. The main road never felt so safe, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Every rearview mirror glance made my blood run cold. Was it the shadows? Or my own imagination playing tricks after the trauma? I finally reached a gas station, its harsh fluorescent lights slicing through the darkness, and parked in front, hands still shaking violently. The clerk gave me a questioning look, but I couldn't speak. I just sat there, eyes darting toward the empty road that led back to Clearwater. The wind carried no whisper this time, yet the air felt thick, heavy, almost sentient. I tried to call a friend to explain what had happened, but my phone still wouldn't work. The text from earlier reappeared in my messages, though I swore it had been deleted. You can't hide from the road. It remembers. That's when I realized Clearwater Road wasn't just a path. It was something alive, something that kept track of those who dared drive its frozen, lonely stretch. I left the gas station, but every mile back to town felt longer than the last. The road seemed endless, twisting unnaturally, streetlights flickering as though struggling to shine. I passed the place where I had first seen the figure, and a chill ran down my spine. There were fresh footprints, but this time they led away from the road, into the forest. I dared not look too closely, fearing that what had followed me before might be hiding just beyond the trees. When I finally reached my home and locked every door, I thought it was over. But that night, I woke to the sound of breathing outside my window. I never saw a face, never touched it, but I knew it was there. Clearwater Road had claimed a piece of me that night, a memory that would haunt me forever. I drive cautiously now, and sometimes, when the wind whispers, I hear my name. My name is Samantha Reed, and this happened during the long, cold nights of January in a tiny Alberta town called Pine Ridge. I was driving home after visiting my grandmother, the roads barely plowed, the snow thick and crunchy under my tires. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, with every street and alley swallowed by darkness. I usually loved the stillness of winter nights, but this one felt wrong. As I crested a hill, I noticed a strange glow in the distance, hovering just above the tree line. At first, I thought it was a house, but there were no structures in that area. The light pulsed faintly, flickering as though it were alive. Curiosity overrode caution, and I slowed the car to get a closer look. The closer I got, the more unnatural the glow became, almost blinding, yet impossible to pinpoint. Then, from the edge of the forest, I saw movement. Something walking toward the light, its gait jerky and mechanical, yet unmistakably human-shaped. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine and gripped the steering wheel tighter. The figure moved with no sound, yet every instinct screamed that it was aware of me. I tried to drive past, but the glow seemed to pulse in sync with my heartbeat, pulling my eyes back to it. Then I noticed more shapes, figures emerging from the tree line, all moving toward the same light, their limbs stiff and jerky. Panic rose in my chest, and I fumbled to start the car again, the engine whining against the ice. Suddenly, one of the figures stopped and tilted its head toward me. Its eyes, or the dark voids where eyes should have been, stared straight into my soul. A whisper echoed in the wind, unintelligible yet filled with malice, and the figures froze. My stomach lurched as I realized this wasn't random. They knew I was there, and the forest itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for my next move. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to convince myself to just drive past. The glow in the distance seemed almost alive, pulsating like a heartbeat, and the figures from the forest didn't move away. They advanced slowly, eerily synchronized. My car's tires slipped on the icy road, and a wave of dread washed over me. I realized that no matter how fast I went, the glow stayed in my vision, as if it were pulling me in. Suddenly, the closest figure stepped onto the road, stopping directly in front of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding inches from it. It didn't flinch. Its head tilted unnaturally, and I could swear it smiled. Or the shadow of a smile formed where its face should have been. Frozen with fear, I noticed its hand rise slowly, pointing toward the glowing light in the trees, as if beckoning me to follow. My instincts screamed to leave, but an inexplicable pull made my feet hesitate. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion and isolation. But as I looked closer, the forest seemed to shimmer around the glowing light, bending unnaturally. The other figures were now emerging from the trees in perfect formation, circling the light as if guarding it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode, and I could feel the cold grip of panic clutching my chest. A sudden gust of wind carried whispers that slithered through the car, voices overlapping, saying my name. I realized then that the figures weren't just walking. They were waiting, feeding off fear, drawing me closer. I tried to put the car in reverse, but it wouldn't respond. The headlights flickered, the engine sputtered, and I felt the presence of something immense, unseen, moving in the darkness just beyond the glow. Every instinct screamed to escape. Yet I was trapped in the forest's icy, unnatural grip. My hands shook uncontrollably as I tried the ignition again, willing the car to start. The figures didn't move closer. They didn't need to. The glowing light seemed to reach into me, tugging at my mind, filling my head with images I couldn't comprehend. I saw fleeting flashes, distorted faces, empty eyes staring back at me, shadowed figures moving in impossible ways. I wanted to scream, but the sound got stuck in my throat. Suddenly, one of the figures stepped onto the icy road again, its limbs bending at impossible angles. The light behind it flared, almost blinding, and I swore I saw hands reaching from the ground, clawing at the air as if trying to grab me. My vision blurred, and the whispers grew louder, chanting my name with a cold insistence. The car engine finally roared to life, but I couldn't move fast enough. The figures seemed to anticipate my every attempt to flee. Something in the forest wasn't human. Something in the light didn't want me to leave. Finally, I managed to shift the car into gear and press the accelerator, tires spinning on the ice as the glow followed me in the distance. But it wasn't just light. It was a presence, a force that seemed to stretch across the road and trees, bending reality around it. Every glance in the rearview mirror revealed figures in the tree line, standing perfectly still, watching me escape. Their movement didn't feel random. It was deliberate, calculated, as if they were herding me somewhere I didn't want to go. The wind howled through the trees, carrying whispers I couldn't make out, voices that seemed older than time itself. Snow swirled around the car like a storm summoned by some unseen hand. My pulse raced, and the light grew brighter, almost painful to look at. I realized that whatever this was, it didn't just exist in the forest. It existed in my mind, in my perception, waiting for the exact moment I let my guard down. Escape felt possible, yet terrifyingly incomplete. The forest seemed to close in around me as I drove. The snow swirling thicker, the light from the hovering glow stretching unnaturally across the treetops. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached, and my breath formed icy clouds inside the car. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. Figures moving alongside me on the edge of the road, gliding across the snow as if floating. My heart pounded in terror, and I realized they weren't just watching. They were guiding me, pushing me towards something I didn't want to face. A sudden gust slammed against the car, shaking it violently. The pulsing light flared so bright I had to look away, and the whispers became intelligible, a chorus of voices chanting, "Follow, follow." Panic and dread warred inside me as I struggled to drive straight. The road twisted impossibly, the trees bending toward the car, and I felt that no matter where I turned, I was trapped in this living nightmare. Suddenly, the glow flared directly in front of the car, as if forming a wall of impossible light across the road. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing, but the light didn't recede. It expanded, filling my vision with blinding brilliance. The figures in the trees vanished, leaving only the light and the eerie silence that followed. My mind screamed to run, yet my car sat frozen on the icy road, like the forest itself had seized control. Then, a figure emerged from the center of the light, taller and more grotesque than any I had seen before. Its faceless head tilted, limbs bending impossibly, and I felt it reaching into my thoughts, probing my fears. I wanted to scream, to reverse, to escape. But my body refused to obey. Every instinct told me to flee, yet every sense told me I was already too close, caught in something that didn't belong to this world, in a forest where the light itself was alive and malevolent. I forced my trembling hands onto the wheel and managed to turn the car around, trying desperately to put distance between myself and the light. The engine roared as tires skidded on ice, snow spraying in every direction. But the glow seemed to follow me, stretching unnaturally across the trees as if the forest itself was alive. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a horrifying instant, I saw the faceless figure inside the light, floating inches above the snow, its limbs bent at impossible angles, staring directly at me. My throat went dry, and I couldn't scream. The whispers intensified, now all around me, pressing into my mind with commands I couldn't ignore. Every instinct screamed to drive faster, but the road twisted unnaturally, and I feared I would crash. The light seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I realized with dread that it wasn't just following me. It was drawing me back, pulling me into the forest, into the center of its unnatural, malevolent glow. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the distant lights of Pine Ridge. Small, warm, and grounded in reality. The glow in the forest didn't retreat immediately, but as I approached the town, it began to shrink, fading into the darkness like a storm dissolving. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and I pulled into my driveway, locking every door and window. I thought I had escaped, but the sense of being watched didn't leave. That night, and every night after, I swore I could hear whispers carried on the wind, soft yet insistent, calling my name and reminding me of the forest, of the light, and the figures that had moved with impossible grace and menace. Even now, when the wind swirls and the trees creak just right, I feel it. The forest remembers those who look into the light, and I know it will never forget me. Pine Ridge isn't just a town, it's a warning, a place where the glow waits, alive and hungry. My name is Lucas Harper, and this happened when I went on a weekend getaway to a remote cabin near the outskirts of an Alberta forest. I was alone, seeking some quiet time to escape work, snow crunching under my boots as I approached the cabin, isolated and hidden from the main road. The air was frigid, the trees around me standing like silent sentinels. their bare branches swaying in the wind. The place looked charming during the day, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretched across the snow, giving the cabin a sinister, almost alive appearance. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, shaking off the cold. The fireplace was empty, the air stale, and the silence pressed against me like a weight. I was about to unpack when I heard it. A faint whisper coming from the corner of the cabin. I froze, thinking it was the wind through a crack in the wall. But the whisper grew clearer, soft and deliberate, like someone was calling my name from the shadows, lingering just out of sight. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the wind. I went to the fireplace, examining the chimney, when I heard it again, closer this time. "Lucas?" The whisper hissed, echoing faintly against the wooden walls. My heart skipped a beat and I spun around, but there was nothing. The cabin was empty, yet I felt watched, every hair on my neck standing on end. I told myself I was imagining things, exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, but the cold dread crawling up my spine said otherwise. I tried to focus on unpacking, but the whispers continued, soft and persistent, always just beyond comprehension. Then I noticed marks on the wooden floor, thin, shallow scratches forming a pattern, almost like symbols, leading from the door to the fireplace. My stomach churned. Whoever or whatever was in the cabin had been here long before me, and it didn't want me to leave. A sense of being trapped settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I tried to calm myself, taking deep breaths as I explored the cabin. The wind rattled the windows, and every creak of the old wooden floors echoed unnervingly. Then I noticed something chilling. The door to the small bedroom at the back was slightly ajar, though I was sure I'd locked it. A cold draft seeped from the crack, carrying whispers that seemed to shift in tone, sometimes urgent, sometimes mocking. My heartbeat pounded in my chest as I approached, and the closer I got, the more distinct the voices became. They were calling me, urging me to step inside. Against every instinct, I slowly pushed the door open. The room was empty, save for a dusty old rocking chair in the corner. It rocked slightly, though there was no one in it. My stomach dropped. The scratches on the floor extended into this room, forming more cryptic patterns that seemed to move if I looked away for even a second. I realized then that the cabin wasn't just abandoned. It was alive with something that hated intruders. I backed away slowly, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all. But the whispers followed, circling my ears like the wind had grown a voice. Then the chair stopped rocking, and the silence was heavier than any sound. My flashlight trembled in my hand, and when I flicked it across the room, I saw faint handprints on the walls, smudged, icy, and impossibly old, yet recently made. My breath caught, and panic surged as I realized that whatever haunted the cabin could manipulate the environment itself. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, sending splinters into the floor. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a deafening roar in my mind. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Every instinct screamed to run, but I was trapped. The cabin had me, and I wasn't sure if I would ever leave. My fear was no longer just for myself. It was for my very soul. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my shaking hands. But the whispers only grew louder, sharper, more insistent. They weren't just voices anymore. They were commands, a chorus of unseen mouths urging me to sit, to look, to listen. My eyes darted around the room, and that's when I saw it. The rocking chair had stopped moving, but there was a figure crouched beneath it, Its face was obscured, shadowed, but I could feel it watching me. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet my legs refused to move. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy iron candlestick, and swung at the figure. My arm passed through it as if it were made of mist, and the whispers became a high-pitched shriek, filling my mind with dizzying echoes. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, my breath visible in the freezing air. It wasn't just haunting the cabin, it was feeding on my fear, growing stronger with every heartbeat, every gasp, every thought of escape. I stumbled backward toward the door, slamming into the wall, the candlestick clanging to the floor. The whispers shifted into laughter, cruel and hollow, bouncing off every corner of the room. Then I noticed something worse. The shadows on the walls weren't just cast by the furniture. They were moving independently, stretching toward me like black, liquid tendrils. I tried to cover my ears, but the sound pierced deeper into my thoughts, pressing against my sanity. In a sudden blur of motion, the figure rose from beneath the chair, impossibly tall now, limbs elongated, face a featureless void. It leaned toward me, and I could feel its cold, unnatural presence filling the room. I realized then that my survival depended on movement. Hesitation would be fatal. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged for the door, wrenching it open. And the moment I stepped into the hallway, the laughter stopped, replaced by silence that pressed down on me like a weight. But I knew it wasn't over. The cabin remembered. I ran down the narrow hallway, heart hammering, the candlestick forgotten on the floor. The cabin seemed alive, the walls shifting in the dim light, groaning as though echoing my fear. The whispers returned, louder this time, 100 voices overlapping, calling my name in tones both urgent and mocking. Shadows stretched across the hallway, moving against the angle of the light, coiling and twisting like serpents. My lungs burned from the cold air, but I couldn't stop. Somewhere ahead, I saw the front door, barely illuminated by the fading daylight outside. I reached it and yanked hard, but it wouldn't budge. The laughter returned, low and malevolent, vibrating through the floorboards beneath me. I could feel the presence behind me, massive and crushing, moving closer with every heartbeat. Then I saw it, a faceless figure emerging from the shadows at the end of the hallway, its limbs elongated and bending impossibly, reaching toward me with a slow, deliberate motion. I realized then that the cabin didn't just want to scare me. It wanted to trap me, to consume me entirely. Desperation surged through me. I slammed my shoulder against the door again and again, feeling splinters bite into my arms, but it held fast. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, 1,000 voices screaming from all directions, echoing inside my skull. I could see shapes forming in the corners, twisting and writhing, reaching out like the walls themselves had become sentient. The faceless figure took another step closer, and with each motion, the hallway seemed to stretch, elongate, trapping me further in the narrowing corridor. Then, in a moment of sheer instinct, I kicked at a nearby window. The glass shattered with a violent crash, snow and wind pouring in, filling the cabin with cold, blinding light. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, and the faceless figure froze, wavering in the doorway like smoke caught in a draft. I didn't wait. I jumped through the broken window, landing hard in the snow, and ran without looking back, the laughter and whispers fading behind me. But I knew the cabin would remember my name. I landed hard in the snow, the wind biting through my clothes, but I didn't stop. My lungs burned as I scrambled away from the cabin, branches whipping my face, snow soaking through my boots. Behind me, the whispers and laughter faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed into my bones. The cabin loomed in the distance, its windows dark. Yet I could feel its presence watching me, waiting. My mind raced. Had I escaped? Or had I only survived the first part of its game? Every instinct screamed that the cabin remembered my fear, that it would not release me entirely. I finally reached the road, the faint glow of distant town lights my only guide. I paused to catch my breath, scanning the forest behind me. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a shadow in the tree line, a figure standing still, its faceless head tilting toward me, as if it knew I was leaving. My pulse thumped wildly, but I forced myself forward, telling myself I had survived, even though I knew the cabin wasn't finished with me. When I reached my car and finally locked the doors, the sense of relief was overwhelming, but fleeting. That night, in the safety of my home, I kept the lights on, unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of the whispers and the faceless figure. Even now, weeks later, I swear I hear faint scratching at my windows or the soft, mocking hiss of voices carried by the wind. I can't go back to that cabin, but sometimes in my dreams, I see it again. Its shadows creeping along the walls, the rocking chair moving, and the whispers calling my name. I realize something that terrifies me to this day. The whispering cabin isn't just a place. It's a living entity, feeding on fear, keeping a memory of everyone who steps inside. I escaped, yes, but a part of it followed me, and I will carry that winter night in Pine Ridge forever. Some places, I've learned, are best left forgotten. My name is Ethan Walker, and this happened one winter evening while I was driving home through a remote stretch of Alberta highway near a small town called Clearwater. The sky was gray, snow falling steadily, and the road ahead was barely visible beneath a thick, icy layer. I had driven this route many times before, but something about that night felt off. The air was unnaturally still, and the forest lining the road was quiet, too quiet, as if holding its breath. As I approached an old wooden bridge spanning a frozen creek, I noticed something strange. The lights from my car reflected off the planks, yet there seemed to be gaps in the wood, spaces where the bridge should have been solid. My stomach tightened. I slowed, trying to make sense of it. The farther I looked, the more distorted the bridge became, almost as if it was shifting before my eyes. And then I heard it. A faint scraping sound, like claws against wood, coming from underneath. I stopped the car completely, gripping the steering wheel tightly, staring at the bridge in disbelief. The scraping sound grew louder, echoing through the still air, and I saw movement beneath the shadows of the planks. Something, or someone, was there, skittering across the ice with impossible speed. I tried to back up, but my tires slipped on the ice and the car shuddered. Fear clawed at my chest. Then, from the center of the bridge, a dark figure emerged. It was hunched, tall, its movements jerky, limbs bending unnaturally. Its face was hidden beneath a hood or shadow, but I could feel its gaze fixed on me, and a sense of overwhelming malice radiated from it. My instincts screamed to escape, but every route seemed blocked. The bridge, the forest, even the frozen creek. It was all conspiring to trap me. The figure raised an arm slowly, pointing toward the far end of the bridge, as if daring me to cross into whatever nightmare awaited. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I tried to take a cautious step forward. The figure didn't move, yet I felt its presence pressing into my mind, a cold weight that made it impossible to think clearly. Every plank of the bridge creaked ominously beneath my feet, and the gap seemed to widen as I moved. It was as if the bridge itself was alive, testing me, daring me to continue. My pulse raced, but curiosity and a twisted need to survive pushed me forward. Then I heard a low, guttural whisper echoing from beneath the bridge. My name drawn out in a hollow, chilling tone. Ethan. Come closer. The sound made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I glanced over the edge of the bridge, trying to see what was down there, but the ice below was black as night, reflecting nothing but shadows. Every instinct screamed to run, yet my feet felt glued to the bridge, my body betraying my desire to escape. As I stepped further, the figure raised its hand, pointing directly at me. A sudden gust of wind howled through the forest, carrying with it whispers that seemed to wrap around my mind, twisting my thoughts. The bridge seemed to elongate unnaturally, the gaps in the planks widening like yawning mouths ready to swallow me. I froze, realizing that one wrong step could plunge me into the icy blackness below, and that whatever waited there wouldn't let me survive. Suddenly, the planks beneath my feet shifted violently, tilting as if the bridge itself was alive, unstable. I stumbled but caught myself on the railing, heart hammering. The figure didn't move, yet I felt it advancing with each beat of my heart, closer, more imposing, its presence suffocating. The whispers became a chorus of commands, urging me forward, enticing me to cross, to meet the darkness at the far end. I realized then that the bridge was a trap, a gateway, and crossing it might mean never coming back. I forced myself to keep moving, each step deliberate, trying not to look down at the black void beneath the bridge. The snow swirled around me, carried by an icy wind that seemed to come from nowhere, chilling me to the bone. The figure stayed perfectly still, yet I could feel it bending space, pulling the bridge toward itself with some unnatural force. My hands shook, clinging to the railing as the wooden planks groaned and twisted beneath my weight. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the bridge behind me seemed to ripple and elongate, making retreat impossible. Then I noticed something horrifying. The gaps in the bridge were no longer empty. Shapes moved beneath the planks, writhing black shadows with elongated limbs, stretching impossibly, whispering my name in distorted tones. Their voices were 1,000 overlapping cries, each one pressing against my mind, trying to draw me down into the icy darkness. Panic rose in me like wildfire. Yet I forced my legs forward, knowing hesitation might be fatal. The figure at the end of the bridge had me exactly where it wanted. A sudden creak echoed through the bridge, louder than anything I had heard before. The figure raised an impossibly long arm, pointing toward me, and the shadows below writhed more violently, pressing against the gaps like they wanted to seize me. My heart pounded, my breaths came in ragged gasps, and the wind carried whispers that clawed into my thoughts. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, yet the bridge seemed to stretch, twisting reality, keeping me trapped. I gripped the railing tighter, forcing myself forward with trembling legs, and as I did, I noticed the shadows below beginning to solidify, forming grotesque humanoid shapes. Their faceless heads turned toward me in unison, their voices a deafening chorus that echoed in my skull. I could feel their intent, malevolent and patient, like predators waiting for their prey to make a mistake. I realized then that crossing the bridge wasn't just dangerous. It was a test, a ritual, and one misstep could mean becoming part of the bridge itself. Every step felt heavier, as if the bridge itself was resisting my progress. The shadows beneath writhed and twisted, their faceless heads following my every movement, while the tall figure at the far end seemed to grow taller, looming impossibly against the dark forest backdrop. I could feel a presence pressing against my mind, feeding on my fear, and the icy wind carried whispers that sounded almost human, begging me to stop. or warning me not to. My legs shook, yet I forced myself onward, gripping the railing like a lifeline. Then, without warning, one of the shadows lunged through a gap in the planks. I screamed, stumbling back, but it passed through me as if I were made of mist. The bridge trembled, the planks cracking beneath my feet. Panic surged as I realized this wasn't just a physical threat. It was a psychological trap, bending reality to test my will. I understood then that the bridge wasn't meant to be crossed, only survived. I forced my focus, ignoring the shadows that writhed beneath me and the whispers clawing at my mind. One final stretch of planks lay before me, the figure at the far end unmoving yet impossibly massive. I clenched my teeth, pushing forward despite the trembling in my legs. The wind howled violently, snow whipping across my face, and I felt the shadows stretch, reaching out as if to drag me into the blackness. Every step was agony, every plank a potential death trap. As I neared the figure, the whispers shifted, turning into a single voice, calm but hollow. Leave, or join us forever. My heart nearly stopped. The figure extended its hand, not threatening, but beckoning, and I felt the air itself pull at me. Summoning every ounce of strength, I sprinted the last few steps, my boots slipping on ice. The moment I passed the figure, the bridge behind me seemed to ripple and shrink, vanishing into darkness, leaving only the frozen creek and the snow-covered forest. I stumbled off the last plank, collapsing into the snow, my lungs burning and body shaking uncontrollably. The bridge behind me was gone, replaced by a black void that stretched across the frozen creek. I pressed myself into the snow, afraid to move, afraid to look back. But the whispers had faded, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I had crossed a bridge that didn't want to be crossed, a bridge that had tested my fear and my will to survive. Finally, I managed to stand, brushing snow from my coat, and I limped toward the faint lights of Clearwater in the distance. The forest seemed alive still, shadows moving in ways they shouldn't. Yet the oppressive force of the bridge no longer pressed on me. I knew I had escaped, but a part of me feared that the bridge had marked me, leaving an invisible tether that might call me back one day when I least expected it. That night, I slept in my car outside Clearwater, too afraid to enter my own home. Even then, I could feel the forest watching, the icy wind carrying whispers that made my name echo in my ears. Days later, I returned to the highway with friends, but no one could find any trace of the bridge. The creek was frozen solid, the forest calm and silent, as if nothing had ever happened. Yet I knew the truth. The bridge wasn't a structure. It was a living entity, a gate to something beyond comprehension. And it would always remember me. Even now, whenever I drive through that area, I feel it. The invisible pull, the quiet pressure at the edge of my senses. I don't know if I will ever be free from it. The vanishing bridge exists in a place where reality bends, and it waits patiently for the next traveler foolish enough to step onto its shifting planks. I survived, but the memory will haunt me forever. My name is Samantha Blake, and this happened during a winter camping trip in the remote forests outside Banff, Alberta. I had always loved the quiet solitude of snow-covered woods, but that day, the forest seemed different. Darker, heavier, almost aware of my presence. I set up my small tent in a clearing, the trees towering like black sentinels around me. Snowflakes fell silently, muffling all other sound, and the forest felt endless, its frozen heart hiding secrets that I was about to uncover. As night fell, I built a small fire to keep warm, its flames flickering weakly against the dark. Then I heard it, a soft crunching, coming from somewhere just beyond the tree line. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a fox. But the sound was deliberate, cautious, moving closer, circling the clearing. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and I wasn't sure if it was human or something far worse. I grabbed my flashlight, my hands shaking, and scanned the tree line. The forest was dark and silent, but the crunching continued, slow and deliberate, circling closer with each passing moment. My heart pounded in my chest, and I realized I was alone, completely isolated, miles from the nearest town. The snow around the clearing showed strange, deep footprints, too large to be human, clawed in shape, forming a rough circle around my tent. I tried to convince myself it was a large animal, but instinct screamed otherwise. Every shadow seemed to twist unnaturally, and the air grew heavier, colder, pressing down on me. Then I heard it whisper my name, low and guttural, a sound that seemed to come from beneath the snow itself. I froze, paralyzed by fear. Whatever was out there wasn't just observing me, it was toying with me, learning my fears. And I knew that if I moved wrong, I might never leave the frozen woods alive. I backed away slowly toward my tent, trying to keep my flashlight steady. But the beam shook with every tremor of my hands. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press against my chest. The footprints in the snow were closer now, and I could see faint impressions of what looked like claws digging deeper into the frozen ground. My mind raced. I had no phone service, no way to call for help, and the nearest ranger station was miles away. Then I caught a glimpse of movement beyond the tree line, a shadow shifting unnaturally, its limbs too long, bending at impossible angles. It moved silently, gliding over the snow without leaving any prints. I tried to make sense of it, but every instinct screamed that I wasn't looking at any animal I had ever known. Its presence radiated something ancient and malevolent, feeding on the fear that had already taken hold of me. I realized then that the forest itself had changed. It wasn't just frozen. It was alive, hunting, and I was its prey. Panic clawed at me as I fumbled with my camping supplies, trying to grab anything I could use as a weapon. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief darkness, I thought I saw dozens of shadowy forms circling the clearing, moving silently over the snow. The air grew colder, every breath visible as a thin plume, and the weight of the forest pressed down like a living thing. The whispers returned, fragmented and overlapping, urging me to leave, or promising that I wouldn't. I forced myself to shine the flashlight in their direction, and my blood ran cold. The figures weren't entirely solid. They shimmered in the dark, translucent, yet unmistakably humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly, pale and empty, and they followed my every movement. I backed into my tent, trembling, realizing that I was trapped in a cage of frozen shadows. The forest had claimed this clearing, and it wanted to claim me. I could feel its hunger, patient and eternal. And I knew that survival meant outsmarting something far beyond human understanding. I grabbed a thick branch from the snow, holding it like a fragile weapon, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The shadows seemed to sense my fear, moving closer, their glowing eyes flicking like dying embers in the dark. The whispers had grown louder again, not words this time, but guttural, chilling sounds that crawled under my skin. My body screamed to run, yet every direction seemed blocked by the endless black forest. The snow beneath my boots crunched loudly, as if the forest itself was alerting the creatures to my presence. Suddenly, One shadow broke from the circle and glided toward me with impossible speed. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, bending at angles no human should manage, and I realized I had underestimated them. I swung the branch with all my strength, but it passed through the figure as if it were smoke. A bone-chilling scream echoed in my ears, not from the creature, but inside my own head. I stumbled backward into the snow, heart racing, knowing that if I didn't escape soon, I might never leave the frozen woods alive. I scrambled to my feet, panic propelling me forward, and ran toward the tree line, the shadows gliding silently behind me, keeping pace without leaving marks in the snow. Every breath came in ragged bursts, and the icy wind cut through my jacket like knives. The whispers had returned to a cacophony of voices, overlapping and shouting my name, disorienting me, pulling me deeper into the forest. My flashlight beam bounced wildly across the trees, revealing glimpses of figures that disappeared when I tried to focus. Then I noticed something horrifying. The trees themselves seemed to twist and bend toward me, as if the forest had become a living maze, reshaping itself to trap me. I realized the shadows weren't just creatures. They were extensions of the forest, part of something far older and far more sinister than I could comprehend. My only chance was to keep moving, to find the faint glow of civilization in the distance, while praying that the forest's frozen heart would not claim me before I reached it. I pushed forward through the snow, lungs burning, as the forest seemed to close in around me. Every tree looked alive, their branches stretching like claws, scraping against my jacket and hair. The shadows were relentless, gliding effortlessly over the snow, keeping pace with me, whispering promises of pain and despair. I could hear them murmuring in tones that sounded almost human, almost familiar, and it made my stomach twist with dread. Suddenly, one figure lunged out from behind a twisted pine. I barely dodged, stumbling over a hidden root and falling hard into the snow. My flashlight rolled, casting jagged beams that illuminated the forest floor for just a second. I saw dozens of shadowy forms emerging from the trees, their faceless heads tilting toward me in unison. Fear surged so violently I could barely think. Yet, somewhere deep inside, I found the will to stand again. I knew I had to escape this nightmare, or the forest would claim me completely. I ran blindly, snow crunching under my boots, the shadows gliding effortlessly behind me. Every sense screamed danger. Every heartbeat was a countdown to doom. I glanced to the side and saw the forest floor shifting, the snow swirling unnaturally around the shadows, as if the trees and the figures were part of the same living nightmare. The whispers rose to a deafening chorus, echoing inside my skull, urging me to surrender, to let the frozen woods take me. Then, a faint glimmer of light appeared in the distance, the dim glow of the highway lights beyond the forest. Hope surged through me, but the shadows intensified, stretching and multiplying, cutting off my path. I pushed forward with every ounce of strength, my hands clawing at tree trunks, feet slipping in the icy snow, determined to reach the light. The forest's grip tried to slow me, twisting branches to block my way, but sheer willpower kept me moving, forcing me closer to safety while the malevolent heart of the woods threatened to engulf me entirely. I burst out of the trees and onto the snow-covered highway, gasping for breath, the lights of passing cars blinding me. The shadows halted at the forest edge, lingering, stretching toward me one last time before dissolving into the swirling snow. My legs trembled uncontrollably, but I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station on the outskirts of Banff, where the warmth and the hum of electricity felt like salvation. I collapsed inside, hands shaking, trying to explain what had just happened. But the employees looked at me with polite concern, unaware of the nightmare I had escaped. Even as I caught my breath, I knew I hadn't truly left the forest behind. Something had followed me. The memory of its whispers, its faceless figures, its ancient hunger. Every time I close my eyes, I see the frozen woods, the shadows circling, and the weight of that malevolent presence pressing into me. I survived, yes, but part of me will always remain trapped in that icy, haunted forest. Weeks later, I returned to my apartment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was still alive in some intangible way. Snowstorms triggered panic, and I often felt icy fingers crawling along my spine when walking outside. I researched the area, but no one had reported anything like what I had experienced. The frozen woods remained an unremarkable stretch of forest to the rest of the world. Yet I knew the truth. The forest was alive, ancient and patient, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler. Its shadows and whispers were real, its hunger eternal, and its power absolute. I survived. But every time I think of that winter night, I hear the whispers calling my name, reminding me that some places are best left untouched. The frozen woods are not just cold, they are alive, and they never forget. My name is Lucas Grant, and this happened during a winter getaway to a remote cabin in the pine forests outside Jasper, Alberta. I had rented the cabin to escape the city and enjoy some solitude. But from the moment I arrived, I felt an uneasy tension in the air. The cabin stood isolated, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out almost all sunlight, their shadows stretching long and dark across the snow. Even the wind sounded strange there, whispering between the trees with a tone that felt almost deliberate. As night fell, I settled in by the fireplace, the warmth and flickering flames providing some comfort. But outside, the forest seemed to shift, shadows moving unnaturally among the trunks. Then I heard it, a faint tapping at the window, rhythmic and slow. I froze, staring into the darkness, convinced it was just branches. But the tapping continued, deliberate, escalating into a slow, almost impatient rhythm. Something, or someone, was out there, waiting, and I was alone. I approached the window cautiously, heart pounding, my breath fogging against the cold glass. The tapping stopped the moment I got close, leaving only an oppressive silence. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, or maybe a branch knocked loose, but instinct told me otherwise. The forest seemed to watch me, the darkness alive with something ancient and patient. Every creak of the cabin, every snap of a pine branch, sounded like it was echoing just for me. Then I heard a whisper behind me, low and guttural, almost too faint to catch at first. I spun around, but the room was empty. My pulse spiked, and I realized I had no phone service, no one to call for help. The wind outside shifted, carrying a faint metallic scent and the faintest echo of footsteps crunching in the snow. I knew then that whatever was out there wasn't just a figment of my imagination. The forest had claimed this cabin, and I had stumbled right into its territory. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The tapping had started again, louder this time, as if the thing outside was testing me, trying to gauge my fear. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the small porch, my boots crunching in the thick snow. The forest beyond the clearing looked impossibly dark, shadows stretching unnaturally between the pines, shifting even though the wind was calm. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but curiosity and a terrible need to understand pushed me forward. Then I saw it, a silhouette barely distinguishable from the darkness, standing unnaturally still among the trees. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, long limbs stretching toward the snow as if defying gravity. The air grew colder instantly, a bone-chilling frost creeping along my skin. I raised the flashlight and the figure vanished, leaving only the whisper of the wind and a sense of watching eyes. My pulse pounded. I realized the cabin was no longer just isolated. It was trapped in something far older, something alive. I stumbled back inside, locking the door and double-checking every latch. Though deep down, I knew it wouldn't stop whatever was out there. The whispers had returned, low and insistent, echoing through the cabin walls as if they were part of the structure itself. I could feel the presence moving around me, circling, patient and patient, learning my weaknesses, feeding on my fear. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the crackle of the fireplace, even the howl of the wind outside, felt amplified, deliberate, meant to unnerve me. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter, feeling ridiculous but desperate, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. My eyes darted to the window, half expecting to see those glowing, impossible eyes staring back. The forest beyond seemed to ripple, the shadows moving just out of sight, waiting for me to make a mistake. I realized then that I wasn't just alone. I was being hunted, and the pine woods weren't merely a backdrop. They were alive, orchestrating a slow, terrifying game. And I was the prey. The tapping escalated into a thud against the cabin door, rattling the frame with each blow. I pressed myself against the far wall, knife trembling in my hand, unsure if I was more afraid of opening the door or of staying inside. The shadows outside seemed to stretch toward me, the pine trees bending unnaturally, as if leaning in to watch. I could feel their gaze piercing the walls, testing my resolve. And a part of me realized the cabin itself was now part of the creature's hunting ground. Suddenly, a window shattered, snow and ice spraying across the room. I screamed, barely dodging the shards, and caught a glimpse of a shadow slipping inside, tall, faceless, limbs stretching impossibly long. The whispers became deafening, overlapping and screaming my name in distorted tones. My mind raced. I needed to survive. But I had no idea how to fight something that wasn't bound by physical reality. Every instinct told me that this was no ordinary intruder. This was something ancient, patient, and hungry. I scrambled to the back door, flinging it open into the snow, hoping to escape. The shadow paused at the threshold, silent but enormous, and I felt a pressure in the air, like a physical force pushing me back. The forest seemed to ripple, the trees leaning further, shadows pooling and moving unnaturally toward the cabin. I ran blindly into the storm, my boots sinking into the deep snow, breath freezing in my lungs, the whispers now a relentless chorus driving me forward. Every step felt like I was being watched from all directions, the shadows moving as if they were alive, stretching impossibly long, their faceless heads tilting in unison. I dared a glance behind me and saw the cabin's warm light flickering strangely, bending and distorting, the very structure shifting in ways that defied reality. I realized then that the forest didn't just hide the creature, it was the creature, and it had claimed that cabin, using its dark heart to ensnare anyone foolish enough to enter. I ran blindly through the snow, the wind biting at my face, my legs numb from exhaustion. But the shadows didn't slow. They glided over the snow effortlessly, circling, cutting off every escape route. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony of distorted voices that seemed to echo inside my skull. I stumbled and fell, my hands scraping icy branches, and a shadow stretched over me, its faceless head tilting down as if inspecting me. I felt an unnatural cold wrap around my limbs, pressing me into the snow like I was being held by invisible hands. Summoning every ounce of strength, I pushed up and sprinted again, heading toward the faint glow of the highway in the distance. The shadows followed, their movements fluid and impossible, bending around trees, slipping through gaps, and closing in relentlessly. I realized the forest wasn't just a backdrop. It was alive, hunting, and the cabin had been only the first trap. If I didn't reach the road soon, the frozen pines would consume me entirely. I neared the highway, the snow crunching underfoot like a countdown, my lungs burning. But the shadows intensified, stretching impossibly, almost filling the clearing. One of the figures lunged forward, gliding silently, its long limbs reaching toward me. I ducked instinctively, feeling a cold, invisible force graze my shoulder. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, to not look back, to survive. Yet the forest seemed to mock me, bending space and distance as if playing a cruel game. Finally, I glimpsed headlights breaking through the dark, illuminating the snow and trees. I screamed for help, waving frantically, and the lights grew closer, momentarily scattering the shadows. They retreated into the twisted pines, but I could feel their gaze following me, patient and unyielding. The forest wasn't done with me. I realized that the cabin, the shadows, and the whispers were all part of an ancient force. And though I was escaping for now, the pines had left their mark, and I would never feel safe in the snow again. I finally stumbled onto the highway, my boots slipping on packed snow, and a passing car's headlights illuminated the terror I had just escaped. The shadows froze at the edge of the forest, their long, faceless forms lingering for just a moment before vanishing into the darkness. My chest heaved as I waved frantically at the vehicle, the warmth of the headlights cutting through the icy fog like a lifeline. I collapsed beside the guardrail, shivering uncontrollably, knowing that I had survived but not truly escaped. Even as I tried to calm my racing thoughts, I realized the forest had left something with me, its whispers echoing in my mind, and the cold, unnerving sense of being watched never truly fading. I knew that the cabin, the pines, and their shadowy inhabitants were still alive, waiting patiently for the next visitor foolish enough to wander into their territory. The experience would haunt me for the rest of my life. Weeks later, I returned to my apartment in the city, but the pines had followed me in some intangible way. Snowstorms triggered panic attacks, and shadows in my peripheral vision made my skin crawl. I researched the area online, but no one else had reported what I experienced. The cabin was just another rental, the forest just another winter landscape. Yet I knew the truth. The pines were alive, ancient and patient, capable of bending reality to trap anyone who entered. I survived, but the memory of the faceless shadows, the whispers, and the malevolent cabin will never leave me. Sometimes at night, I hear faint tapping and distant rustling, and I remember that the forest never truly lets go. It waits, always waiting, for the next traveler to stumble into its frozen heart, just as I did. The cabin in the pines taught me a terrifying lesson. Some places are not meant to be visited, and some horrors are eternal. My name is Ethan Moore, and this happened one late autumn evening while driving through a rarely traveled stretch of highway near Drumheller, Alberta. I had taken this route countless times during the day, but at night, the road felt different, like it existed outside the normal world. The trees along the roadside cast long, jagged shadows, and the wind carried an unnatural chill even through my closed windows. The emptiness of the highway pressed down on me, as if I was completely alone in a frozen void, miles from help. As darkness thickened, I noticed faint shapes in the distance, figures that seemed to flicker in and out of sight along the tree line. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks, but soon the shapes moved deliberately, pacing alongside my car as if keeping up with me. The radio crackled and distorted, faint whispers spilling through the static. I felt my pulse race, realizing that this was no ordinary drive, and whatever lurked along the road was patient, intelligent, and terrifyingly close. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to stay calm, but the shadows along the road grew more distinct, their shapes twisting unnaturally. They didn't run. They glided, moving in perfect sync with my car, keeping pace without a sound. The radio's whispers became louder, distorted voices repeating my name in an unintelligible cadence that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to speed up, but the shadows remained, blocking the road ahead in a way that seemed impossible. Panic surged as I realized the road itself had changed. The familiar turns and signs I knew by heart were gone, replaced by stretches of dark, featureless asphalt that twisted and warped under the headlights. My GPS flickered, then died entirely. I was trapped, and the shapes were no longer content to follow. They were beginning to anticipate my movements, herding me deeper into the forest. Every instinct screamed to escape, but the vanishing road had claimed countless travelers before me, and now it had its sights set on me. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine whining as my car surged forward through the darkness. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel of light through the empty highway, but the road ahead no longer looked familiar. I had driven through Drumheller dozens of times before, yet none of the landmarks were there. No road signs, no gas stations, just endless asphalt stretching into the black horizon. The shadows along the tree line had grown clearer now. They weren't just vague shapes anymore. They were tall, thin figures with limbs that seemed slightly too long, bending at unnatural angles as they moved. The worst part was how effortlessly they kept pace with my car. No matter how fast I drove, they remained just within view, gliding along the edge of the forest like silent hunters. Then the radio suddenly blasted a burst of static so loud I nearly lost control of the wheel. Through the noise, I heard something unmistakable, a whisper repeating my name again and again, as if something inside the car had joined the pursuit. My heart pounded as I slapped the radio off. But the whispering didn't stop. Instead, it seemed to echo faintly through the car itself, vibrating through the dashboard and the doors like a distant voice trapped inside the metal. I glanced in the rearview mirror and instantly wished I hadn't. Far behind me, barely visible through the darkness, something massive was moving along the center of the road. At first, I thought it was another car, but there were no headlights, only a towering silhouette stretching unnaturally high above the asphalt. It moved slowly, yet with each glance in the mirror, it appeared closer, as though distance meant nothing to it. My breathing grew shallow. I slammed the accelerator down again, desperate to put miles between myself and whatever was following me. But the road ahead began to twist in impossible ways, bending sharply where it should have been straight. The vanishing road was changing around me, and it felt like it was guiding me somewhere I was never meant to reach. My hands were shaking so badly that the steering wheel rattled under my grip. The road twisted sharply to the left, then curved again in a way that made no sense based on the route I had taken hundreds of times before. My headlights swept across the asphalt, revealing something that made my stomach drop. Standing directly in the middle of the road ahead was a tall figure, motionless and silent. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching across the cold pavement. The figure didn't react. It simply stood there, its long arms hanging at unnatural angles, its body stretched thin like a shadow pulled too far. My headlights illuminated it fully now, but its face remained completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, nothing but a dark, featureless surface that seemed to absorb the light. Then, slowly, its head tilted toward me. Not a natural tilt, but a sharp, mechanical movement, as if its neck had no bones at all. The moment it moved, the radio burst to life again with deafening static. Panic completely took over. I swerved violently, steering the car around the figure and slamming the accelerator to the floor. For a split second as I passed it, my headlights flashed across its body, and I saw something far worse than I expected. It wasn't solid. The creature's shape flickered like smoke, its limbs stretching and folding unnaturally, as if it was made from living darkness rather than flesh. I looked into the side mirror as I sped past it, expecting to see it shrinking behind me. But instead, the road behind was empty. Completely empty. The figure had vanished the moment I passed it. My relief lasted only seconds. Ahead of me, another bend in the road appeared, and as my headlights rounded the curve, my chest tightened in horror. The exact same figure was standing there again in the middle of the road, waiting. That's when I realized something terrifying. No matter how far I drove, the road wasn't letting me leave. By this point, my mind was racing so fast, I could barely think straight. The same figure appearing again and again meant one thing: the road itself was trapping me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced myself to keep driving. Maybe if I didn't stop, maybe if I didn't slow down, I could break whatever nightmare this was. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but the forest had grown unnaturally close. The trees leaned toward the asphalt as if pulled by gravity, their long branches clawing into the headlights. Shadows moved between the trunks, far more than the single figure I'd seen before. Dozens of them now. Tall shapes pacing the car silently from both sides of the road. My headlights flickered suddenly, dimming for a split second. And in that brief darkness, I saw them standing directly on the asphalt ahead. An entire line of those faceless figures, shoulder to shoulder, blocking the road completely. I slammed the brakes again, heart pounding violently in my chest. The car skidded sideways before stopping just a few yards from the line of figures. For a moment, everything was silent. The engine idled. My breath echoed loudly inside the car. The figures didn't move, but their presence felt overwhelming, like the entire road was pressing down on me. Then, slowly, they began to move forward. Not walking, gliding. Their bodies stretched unnaturally as they approached, their limbs bending in ways that no human body ever could. My headlights flickered again, casting jagged shadows across their blank faces. I threw the car into reverse and slammed the gas pedal, desperate to escape. The tires spun violently against the asphalt before finally gripping the road. The car lurched backward down the highway, but when I looked through the rear window, my stomach dropped again. More figures were emerging from the darkness behind me, stepping silently onto the road. The vanishing road had closed in from both directions, and there was nowhere left to run. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The road ahead was blocked. The road behind was closing in. Those tall, faceless figures were gliding toward the car from both directions, their movements slow and deliberate, like predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I tried to think. The headlights flickered again, casting long, distorted shadows across the road. That's when I noticed something strange. Between the figures ahead, there was a narrow gap in the line. It was small, barely wide enough for the car to pass through. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gear into drive and floored the accelerator. The engine roared as the car shot forward. The figures didn't move out of the way. They simply turned their faceless heads toward me as I sped between them. For a terrifying moment, I felt something cold brush along the side of the car. like invisible hands dragging across the metal. The moment I passed through them, everything changed. The road suddenly straightened, the forest pulled back, and the familiar highway signs of Drumheller appeared ahead in the distance. My GPS flickered back to life. The radio went silent. It was as if the nightmare had ended instantly. I drove the rest of the way home in stunned silence, gripping the wheel so tightly my hands ached. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see those figures gliding behind me again. But the road remained empty, completely normal. For weeks afterward, I tried to convince myself it had been exhaustion or stress playing tricks on my mind. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving alone, the radio will crackle suddenly with a burst of static. And just before it goes silent again, I swear I hear something whisper my name. Because the truth is, the vanishing road doesn't disappear. It just waits for the next driver.